Welcome to another MassMEDIC webinar. I'm Rachel Robinson, Chief Operating Officer at MassMEDIC, and I'm absolutely thrilled to be here for what I know is going to be another really interesting discussion. We're going to be talking today about driving competitive advantage, how CDMOs are powering MedTech innovation. And this webinar, the text and the context for this is actually pulled directly from our partner Alira Health's MedTech report that they do every year. This is an incredibly valuable piece of information. You could obviously scan the link on the screen, the QR code, if you want to download it right now, but we will also be sending out information about how you can get it right after this session as well with the video to the webinar. So you will be able to have access to that. So don't worry if you can't take all the notes, you can also get access to the report for free. So just a few quick housekeeping notes before we get started. We highly encourage questions. The best way for you to submit those is to use the Q&A box at the bottom, usually of your screen. Sometimes it's on the side. You can enter those at any time throughout the presentation, and then we'll take a look at those at the end and answer them in real time. So absolutely ask questions. We very much encourage it. And you are all off audio and I believe video, so don't worry about background noise. Everything should be good to go. If you have any tech issues, you can't hear anything, see anything, you can pop it in the Q&A or you can send a chat. Just let us know if anything's going on funky that we can't see. But other than that, we're absolutely thrilled to have you. And I'm going to turn things over to Sophia from Alira Health, who's going to kick us off with this incredible webinar.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you for the introduction. And actually, thanks, MassMEDIC, to giving us another opportunity to present the insights of our industry research, an industry that I like to call the backbone of the medtech space, which involves the development and manufacturing of these devices that become increasingly complex, requiring more specialized capabilities, and at the same time face price pressure and supply chain volatility. Today, we'll present the key trends that we observed and try to offer an overview, a snapshot of the current state and what's going to look in the industry in the future. Again, this is the 5th edition of our report. I want to thank my whole team that's connected here today and for putting together this last and great edition of the report. And every year we try to explore a different angle of the industry. We started collaborating with MassMEDIC in 2020 when we focused on the impact of COVID-19 in the supply chain of medical device manufacturing. And we ended last year with a deep focus on regions outside the US. We focused on Europe. And from that analysis, what we highlighted was the regionalization of the supply chain. So showing how the Americas, Europe, and Asia Pacific are developing their own clusters of medical device to serve the local market and be more competitive in each of the region. A trend that is only accelerating today with the current geopolitical climate. Before we dive in, just a few words about Alira Health. We're a global healthcare consultancy firm serving life science companies with an offering that spans from clinical and regulatory affairs, strategy, market access, and the transaction advisory division that I represent. We do not solely focus on the CDMO market, but our technology and clinical expertise on the broader life science space give actually a different vision, a broader vision on and help us anticipate what are the trends that are affecting the CDMO space. We advise both entrepreneur-led as well as private equity-backed companies on transaction advisory services and classic buy and sell side mandates, while our strategy team, which is represented by my colleague Eva, who will speak soon, supports both financial sponsor and corporation assessing the commercial value of their M&A targets. In the past 10 years, we've helped over 100 players, 100 transactions in this space collectively. So we can say that we help the consolidation of the market. With that, I'll hand over to my colleague Eve, We'll begin with an overlook of the performance of the medtech market, and then we'll walk you through the current status and challenges in the medtech CDMO space. I'll be back in 15-20 minutes to discuss a little bit the trends in M&A and the future outlook of the industry.
Thanks so much, Sophia, for kicking off our discussion, and thanks everyone for joining us today. I want to start this presentation off by looking at the medtech market at large, because its performance, needs, and demands really trickle down to impact contract manufacturing. What you see here is a graph that shows the growth in the overall medical device market through its revenue bridge, and it breaks down the contributions of different segments. Globally, the market was estimated to have grown 5.2% from 2023 to 2024, with sales growing across consistently high-performing segments like cardiovascular, orthopedics, and drug delivery. In general, we saw that these growth rates moderated a bit compared to 2023. For example, in cardiovascular segment, it grew almost 11% in 2024, compared to almost double, 23%, the year prior. One explanation that we have for this is destocking. As Sophia alluded to earlier, with some of the ongoing supply chain challenges that these firms face, many US hospitals and distributors have actually stockpiled their inventories for the past few years in order to protect themselves from further disruption or instability. So now they're going to be more focused on actually using up their current inventories rather than placing new orders. Turning back to the bridge, we saw drug delivery was really the only segment that stood out in terms of accelerated growth compared to last year. This is driven, of course, by the expansion of GLP-1 therapies, as well as a supportive regulatory and reimbursement environment. We can say that medtech appears to be returning to pre-pandemic growth patterns, with drug delivery really emerging as a major driver. When we turn to the capital markets in this past year, M&A activity has picked up a bit, especially among large multinational companies like J&J. After no IPOs in 2023, a handful of medtech companies went public in 2024. Startup funding has remained steady over the last year, with over 430 deals and deal sizes and valuations both increasing for Series A and B. Despite progress, we feel it's critical to remember that medtech still trails behind both pharma and biotech markets in terms of investment and overall market activity. And now, as we look ahead, different macroeconomic forces and potential budget cuts to programs like the NIH could have even more ripple effects on medtech. In order to maintain this momentum that medtech has started to see post-COVID, market players really need to navigate funding and investment headwinds very carefully now. Next, we can look to how the performance of the device market has impacted CDMOs. We can see on the left here the estimated sizes and growth rates of the global contract manufacturing market, which is segmented by performance in the US, Europe, and the rest of the world. In 2024, we saw that the global CDMO market was estimated to be valued at $89 billion, growing 9.2% since 2023. Together, the US and European markets accounted for 55% of this total, or roughly $48 billion. The remaining 45% includes a significant contribution from Asian players, particularly in Taiwan, Singapore, China, and India. Their lower labor costs make them incredibly well suited for bulk ordering and commodity components. Across the board, all regions experienced high single-digit growth, with the US slightly outpacing Europe last year, likely due to consolidation through M&A. As Sophia mentioned, we actually focused our annual report last year on a deep dive into the European market and its trends, where we were able to highlight some regional expertise, resilience of smaller, more specialized firms, and the growth opportunities within them. So if you're interested, you can always find our past reports on our website. In the following section, I'd like to walk through some of the market trends that we've witnessed today and their impact on different types of contract manufacturing firms. We've organized the following slides to highlight trends in light blue, and then note which types of CDMOs are affected in purple. And then all the way to the right, we've scored the impact and the magnitude of the impact. So we begin here on a positive note with a few drivers. The first is bridging competency gaps. Because CDMOs, especially large players today, are really repositioning themselves as long-term strategic partners to their OEMs, rather than being, say, material or subcomponent suppliers. This means that through either organic or inorganic growth, CDMOs have been able to grow their capabilities so that they can occupy a greater breadth of services across the value chain. In practice, this could look like CDMOs helping OEMs streamline their operations after a big merger. So for example, they could take over an OEM's plants or even integrate into new facilities. The next two trends here are far newer. As we've spoken with different clients and industry leaders, we've seen an increasing interest in both sustainability and AI. Firms that already have adjacent offerings here are going to be best positioned to try to differentiate themselves with brand new services. For example, if you think of plastics manufacturers that already have expertise in different biodegradable or bioabsorbable polymers, they would be best equipped to actually help their clients explore new sustainable ways to switch over some of their portfolios away from PTFE and some of the other polymers that have recently come into focus from a sustainability lens. In a similar vein, when we speak of AI for CDMOs, we're mainly referring to ways to cut costs in manufacturing, often through simulations or automated processes like digital factory twins. Both of these trends, as I mentioned, are really quite new. So not adopting them in the short term isn't going to influence the viability of a manufacturing business. It's more so that being an early mover right now might allow for some extra stickiness in terms of customer relations and contracts. Moving on to the next slide, the first two trends highlight two additional ways that firms can differentiate themselves. On the top, we've called out advanced material science as a key type of specialization. We've seen nitinol gain a ton of traction recently as a durable component within both cardiac and orthopedic devices. As a result, CDMOs with expertise in handling nitinol may charge a premium for their skills, including micromachining and coating. We've also seen this growing interest in nitinol influence steelmaking by positioning those firms as very attractive targets. As for trend number 5, when we refer to diversifying outsourcing, we're considering that instability in supply chains in the past 5 years has actually now altered business planning discussions moving forward. Both nearshoring and contracting with multiple manufacturers can help OEMs ensure that their orders are going to be completed efficiently. In trend number 6, we note that macroeconomic headwinds on clinical research will impact the pipeline of new therapies and therefore trickle down to affect contract manufacturing. Some smaller CDMOs, like design firms, or those who have their own clinical validation or CRO departments, might end up losing more early stage pipeline leads this way. On our last slide here, we've compiled several restraints. They're centered around more frugal inventory management, pricing pressures, and some macroeconomic roadblocks we've seen arise in the past several months. First, we have seen a high degree of competition between firms, which can force CDMOs to lower prices to attract new customers. Now, for larger firms that are going to be already working with economies of scale and receiving high purchase volumes, this may not come as a large challenge. For smaller firms, though, they could be really risking cutting their margins at a detrimental level. this is one of the driving forces between some of the more strategic acquisitions that we've seen today and that Sophia will walk you through in the M&A section. As for trend number 8, as I mentioned earlier, destocking across medtech segments may reduce the number of new orders that CDMOs receive in 2025. However, overstocking today doesn't necessarily mean that supply chain shortages are behind us. One of the key factors that really made past shortages so widespread was the lack of proactive reporting mechanisms to the FDA. Right now, ongoing discussions around reforms of the CARES Act might strengthen FDA's ability to anticipate and manage further disruptions. With that being said, shortages of certain devices certainly remains a possibility, particularly if any new tariffs are implemented. This brings us to our final focus, which is the threat of tariffs and potential price increases, shortages, and delays that come along with them. Developments here are ever-changing, and the potential for new executive orders and delays could still take effect. Right now, within this dynamic landscape, what we do know is that medtech companies in the US are actively lobbying to be exempted from price increases. In the past, these companies have been able to dispute tariffs on some of their portfolio items, particularly durable medical equipment, by showing that they assist in the management of disabilities. As for how CDMOs should reply and respond to tariffs, long-term restructuring of global supply chains may be in order. But in the short term, firms should start by monitoring price pressures and the responsiveness of their competitors, while also ensuring that contracts with partners are protecting them in the cases of tariff escalation. They can also follow some of the strategic patterns that I've already discussed, like diversifying sourcing options when possible, and tightening inventory management and control systems to remain both flexible and agile. As we turn to the next slide, I want to highlight that we've been able to monitor those past market trends and dynamics on a rolling basis with multiple approaches. One of them being our proprietary database of CDMOs, which is segmented by size in order to give us insights on the prevailing capability ranges and trend differences across firms. In our table here, we show the current state of our database. It is continuously updated and currently includes 650 CDMOs, primarily based in the US and Europe, but also extending to a multinational footprint. They're analyzed individually to build the market from the bottom up. And we map their capabilities, locations, end markets, and ownership, and also merge acquired companies on a regular basis. If you look to the left of the table, we can see that the largest market share, approximately 90%, belongs to our larger CDMO players with over $100 million in revenue, who still continue to grow each year. Despite all the M&A activity that's occurred in the past, there's still plenty of attractive targets, especially when we consider cross-border M&A. Particularly, we can highlight the 500 small and micro players on the market, some of whom are extremely specialized in their capabilities and make quite attractive targets to round out a larger firm's value chain. So with that, I turn the floor over to Sophia to delve a bit further into M&A.
Thanks, Eve. And yeah, definitely. Speaking about M&A, maybe we can switch to the next slide, and where we map and we try to track all the M&A activity that happens in the MedTech CDMO space. On the first graph on the top left, we can see the deals from 2020 to 2025. 2025 was updated last Friday. We see that the top number of deals occurred in 2021 with 82 deals that has not yet been reached in the following years, but still the number of deals that occur in this space are quite high. In dark blue, you can see the private equity investments in players in the industry, while in lighter blue, you see private equity-backed acquisition, meaning all the add-on that private equity have done through their platforms. While in green, you see the pure strategic deals, so acquisition done by public strategic players or private strategic players that are not backed by a financial sponsor. So we have seen we've seen a lot of activity in this market, and maybe the graph on the right where that shows the same number but splits the activity by quarter gives us an indication of 2025, where the first quarter had the same number of deals of 2024, 12 deals. We expect generally the second part of the year is more active. Then of course we need to count in some of the current geopolitical uncertainties that we'll discuss in a little bit later. But before, I wanted to focus a little bit more on 2024, which are the type of deals that occurred in 2024 by observing the three bottom graph. Starting from the left, design and development was a capability offered by many of the acquired, many of the targets, and followed by assembly and then machining, tooling and packaging. It's interesting to know to spend some time on the target end market. So minimal invasive surgery, drug delivery, and cardiovascular, followed by orthopedics, were the most sought after capabilities. I mean, markets served by the target companies that were acquired. Those these trends reflect what he was showing at the very beginning, right? The top growing and the top performing markets in the broader MedTech, OEM MedTech space. Companies reinforce on one side their vertical integration, but as well they acquire capabilities that they may not be able to, or may take for them too much time to develop internally via, and they prefer to go via follow an inorganic growth strategy. In terms of location, 60 of the 64 deals, 2/3 were in the US, followed by a strong portion of targets headquartered in Europe, and 12 of those deals were cross-border acquisitions, so where the main company was headquartered in one macro region different from the target. We see here that a lot of the activity is driven by private equity, and actually our latest panel at MD&M last February, we spent sometimes discussing the buy and build model of private equity and their continuous increasing presence in the sector. In the next slide, we tried to monitor these platforms. On the left bar line graph, you can see the number of new private equity platform by foundation year. We see two peaks, one in 2019 and the other in 2021, but we see overall 93 different private equity backed CDMO platforms. Out of these, we're noticing that approximately 60 to 70 have a strong focus on MedTech. The others have a broad service offering, including medical device manufacturing. But what else does this graph on the left show us? It shows that 47 of these deals, if we count the deals that occurred before or in 2020 or before, have been held by private equity company for quite some time, more than the classic 3 to 5 holding period. So we see private equity adopting a more long-term approach to value creation. So shifting from the traditional holding period to a longer exit cycles to surely enhance scalability and the attractiveness of their portfolio company. And this year we did not only track the platforms, but we really tried to track all the add-on activities that they have done in the MedTech CDMO space. So on the bubble chart on the right, we see the platforms by foundation year, and on the left the number of add-on acquisitions that they have done. This doesn't show anything surprising, of course, that platforms that have been held for longer tend to have a higher number of add-on to the original platform, let's say. And we, in our report, that's once again free downloaded at our link, and you can have it. It's already available. We really represented graphically all these platforms with their financial sponsor and their add-on all their add-ons throughout the year. So we have just three screenshots that show all the companies that we've been representing and monitoring throughout these years. That's the status of the industry right now, where I would say that still the biggest trends that we're seeing is this increased outsourcing activity, because operating a captive manufacturing footprint is not an intrinsic competitive advantage for OEMs, and there are different sub-trends to these that have driven the continuous trajectory of the medtech industry to outsource phases of the manufacturing value chain. Let me elaborate a little bit more on these trends. The first one is the consolidation. So consolidation also on the OEM side. So large M&A transaction among the top medical device companies, bring in the necessity to integrate and simplify and streamline the complex operation post-merge of the two companies. And this has led branded manufacturers to increasingly rely on CDMO partners to follow scalability and cost synergies. The second aspect for an increased outsourcing activities from OEM is innovation, because medtech OEMs pursue constant product innovation, both internally, organically with their R&D teams, but also inorganically via partnership or M&A with emerging companies. And this focus on both internal and external innovation results in a higher number of products, new product launches, and therefore a more complex value chain to manage. So CDMOs have been able to help OEM in these activities and generate economies of scale as well as cost competitiveness for early stage innovative devices. The third one that connects to one of the first thing that I started, like the convergence, and what I call convergence is the increased complexity of medical devices that combine digital, robotic, therapeutic capabilities, and once thought of domain to be domain of different stakeholders. And while the convergence of technology platforms and business model lead OEMs to find design and manufacturing capabilities outside their core technical competencies. So find a partner that can support integrating, converging all these different competencies to the manufacturing of a device. And the fourth but not least, regulation, because in the past decades, both US and European regulators have raised the standard of safety and quality necessary to bring medical devices to the market. So such restriction represent an increased cost and liabilities for the medtech OEMs, so that prefer to outsource larger portion of their value chain to CDMOs that are specialized in regulatory and quality compliance for the realization of their devices. Of course, we're not naive about the market growth and challenges. We expect a growth in 2025 that's single-digit growth, moderate, that is definitely driven by this increased outsourcing just mentioned, but it's partially offset by the challenges, the increased competition, the price pressure, and the supply chain adjustments that are not easy to predict. A trend that's worth mentioning is innovation and customization of devices, though the rise of personalized medicine and patient-specific technologies demand more precision, flexibility, and speed, and a different approach to the manufacturing. And so CDMOs are facing a new challenge, but as I would consider it more a new opportunity to adapt some of their manufacturing to what we call more customized medical devices. And lastly, maybe a reflection on M&A, right? The core activity that we're monitoring. Of course, the large number of emerging platforms that we've seen above prompt consideration under around their exit, the exit of this platform and their marketability. So the private equity platform exit opportunities in 2025 will be influenced by the strength of the revenue growth trajectories, as well as the ability to demonstrate a clear differentiation. We see large medtech corporation that Medtech CDMO corporation that continue to seek acquisition targets to complement their existing capabilities, therefore presenting some favorable condition for strategic exit, or at the same time, secondary buyout can also be an option where larger private equity firm look to acquire a well-developed CDMO that has proven a good track record. So we also expect competition among acquirers for CDMOs that have specialized capabilities in high growth segment, drug device combination products, the active implantables, and all the complex electromechanical assemblies capabilities. So these are a few of the identified areas where we see the competition amongst acquirer. And but of course, there is a need to closely monitor market condition. But in the end, the question that we're seeing on the market is what's the role of M&A in this changing and volatile market condition. So what we see is a positive outlook for M&A, where it's not longer just a tool for growth, but it's more even a strategic necessity, if you can say it this way, where the regulatory pressure, supply chain disruption, and can actually reshape the global dynamics for which companies can actually use acquisition to gain the famous regional manufacturing capabilities and reduce their exposure to geopolitical risk, also increasing their operational resilience. Especially in a space where like CDMOs, where the supply chain and the proximity to the final customer is key to the delivery of the final product. So in short, I can conclude that M&A has evolved from being opportunistic to be potentially a response to this industry turbulence. Therefore, we're still expecting a significant a number of deals in 2025. Maybe the market will prove us wrong, but that's our expectation. And yeah, I think that we went through the main trends here. I see a few questions in the Q&A that I'm gonna open up in a second, but just wanted to highlight that this is just an overview of our full analysis conducted in our report, where we also deep dive on the plastic market and the orthopedic CDMO market. So you can see deep dive on these two markets on top of the analysis that we presented today. Let me open the Q&A section, and I see one question about the list of the top CDMOs by name, if we could share it writtenly or verbally. I mean, the number of CDMOs, we identified 650, right? Of course, the largest one are the one that, like Jabil, DuPont, with the 2024 acquisition of Donatel, Flex. There's a large list of top CDMOs in the space. Happy to take this question offline if there's any specific subsection. are we tracking the inventory values of major OEMs? So we're not tracking their values directly. All our feedback come from industry feedback and about speaking with OEMs and CDMOs. But that's actually an interesting point that we could develop in our further research. Then let me go through them. So the name of the most active private equity players. Sure, there are several private equity players that, of course, have multiple platforms in this space. One of the most, let me cite the most active that already completed one of the latest acquisitions is Montagu, very active in the orthopedic CDMO space. But in our report, you can see the full list of this private equity active in this space. I see. CDMO. Does Alira see CDMOs focus on tangible contact, acquiring electronics and software companies? That's definitely that's a very interesting question, right? I thought about convergence and the need of having of these devices that are getting more complex to realize with electronic component, wireless components, connected devices. So definitely that's a trend that we're seeing from the design firm already, right? With the in-housing and increasing their portion of engineers, software engineers in their workforce, for example. So that's definitely a trend that we're seeing, yes.
I see here, do you have any data on how GLP-1s will affect the medtech sector? For example, of course, reduction in surgical procedures and potential investment in surgical innovation. Certainly, as you underlined, I think, of course, we can't ignore how it's affected pharma in terms of shifting priorities away from potential other pipeline programs in order to develop these assets. I think also, as we've seen, the drug delivery segment in medtech really explode with the pervasiveness of GLP-1s and different ways to administer the drugs. For example, auto injectors, different smart devices for that same purpose. So we're seeing now different drug delivery players innovating on top of these different injector models to be able to differentiate from one another, especially as generics start entering the market.
I have a question, if I may use my moderator prerogative here. So at MassMEDIC, we've seen a lot around the challenges of sterilization over the last few years. We've done a lot of education on ETO sterilization. We've seen a lot come out of EPA. As you're talking about trends toward near shoring, do you think that sterilization patterns are going to change? Are things going to be shifting in the way folks are approaching this? So I would be really curious on your thoughts there.
Totally. Thanks, Rachel. And I think alongside MassMEDIC, Alira has been monitoring this situation pretty closely for the past few years. I think we wrote a case study on this maybe 2 years ago in our report, and obviously that information now stands to be updated with everything coming out. But in my opinion, I think that firms have a few different directions where they can adapt, right? So right now, some companies have, of course, opted to sterilize in Mexico to cut costs. And I think it's possible with the lower tariffs there that cost advantage may still stand, especially if these OEMs don't have standing US sterilization partnerships. in the US, the EPA has continued delaying different emissions requirements and passing new standards for ETO, which has in turn given companies, I think, a little bit more time to maybe redesign their sterilization processes to fit domestic standards. But again, as we said, I think with the macroeconomic and regulatory factors, we're seeing it really is sort of a very dynamic, fast-moving target, or slow-moving, which maybe these companies stand to benefit from a bit. But thanks for asking.
I see another question about the revenue concentration that has changed over time. It is changing with of course the consolidation a little bit, but still the larger, like you have the data from last year, and the large CDMOs represented 25% of the total market, and what we call medium, so companies between 100 and 500. So it's still in line with what we're seeing this year. Then I see a question about the split of the market of the 89 million across the different subsegment of the Medtech CDMOs. Yes, we have done that exercise in the past, and also to build our consolidated version, we put together all the different markets. This year we represented as a separate only the orthopedic market, the 11 billion market of orthopedics, without focusing on the other market. We give a strong split on what is implant, robotics, and instruments in the orthopedic market, but we do not, we use it for assessing the market, of course, but it's not detailed in the report, right? We focus on orthopedic. And we did I think it was reporting 3 years ago version, where you can see the split already, like with the deep dive section, category after category in all the markets.
And then I think, maybe if we just have time for one more, if anyone's got any more from the audience, please pump them in. We have a few more minutes, but I definitely have one more. I've led a number of panel discussions around the business case of sustainability and designing products with different materials. Just curious, are you seeing new products be developed with new materials as sustainability goals become more and more public facing, and as Europe requirements are getting a little stricter around sustainability? Just curious what you're seeing.
Definitely. And I think US companies, especially those larger multinational organizations, are already adjusting to European standards in order to, in some cases, make it onto formularies. Medical devices need to demonstrate their sustainability. So certainly that can adjust our portfolio offerings here in the US too. I'd say in terms of maybe redesigning maybe older products or creating newer iterations with green solutions, that process to switch is ongoing. There are a few biodegradable polymers that we've seen sort of take off, for example, polylactic acid. There are a few different applications, drug delivery being one of them, and of course for surgical components like implants and fabrications. This isn't only like a sustainability question then, but it becomes better for patients in the long term, because they no longer have to have these removal surgeries around implants or sutures if they're able to be actually reabsorbed back into their bodies. In general, though, of course, these material switches are going to be much more feasible in the lower classes of medical devices, like syringes or surgical trays. But they are innovating and replacing up to, the highest level of actually implants into patients. So I think it's a really exciting space to be watching right now.
Awesome. Well, if we don't have any more questions, I may close by just saying thank you so much, Eve and Sophia. That was an incredible presentation. And for all the attendees, we will be sending out copies of the video so that you can watch this again, as well as a link to the report. Thank you both again. I give you a virtual round of applause and say thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you, Rachel, and to the audience. We're here to reply any questions. To like, feel free to send us emails about the report, any feedback, and we're more than happy to reply and try to be helpful to navigate the market with the what we're observing, right? So thanks everybody for attending, and thanks, Rachel.
Absolutely, and I can only encourage that you reach out to them because they're excellent partners. All right, everyone, have a wonderful rest of your day, and we'll see you all soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.